Hi, this is Kim from the Quilt-Pro Studio Chicks. Today I'm going to teach you just the basic overview of the Quilt Wizard. The Quilt Wizard is pretty amazing. It's one of the best things about Quilt-Pro. So first of all, when you open Quilt-Pro, usually this is what will come up first, but if it doesn't, let me show you how to find it again. You come up here to this ribbon bar right here, and the second button over right here, it looks like a quilt with a little wand next to it. You hover over it, it'll pop up and say Quilt Wizard. You do a left click on that and it pops up. Now, this allows you to set up your quilt in so many different ways. So first of all, I'm just going to go over the different tabs here and what we can do on each of those tabs. So the first tab is the layout, and this is the type of quilt we're going to do. If it's straight blocks, that means they're blocks that go straight across and straight down. This is just a traditional quilt. If we click on the next one, a diagonal with a block in the corner, if you look, there is an entire block in the corner here with a little triangle up here in the corner. So that, if you want that specific type of quilt setup, this is the one you click on. Diagonal with a sash in the corner means that when you click on that one, if you look, the sashing goes into the corner. So this line right here that goes in between the blocks, we can set it up so that there's a sashing that goes into the corner. That is what this selection right here is. The next one, if I click on it in the little preview window right here, it's going to show us blocks on point. So what this means is we're going to be able to go in and put the block in the white part right here. This part that's a blue, you will go in and put an alternate fabric, but you won't necessarily put a block in there. That's what that setup's for. So if you have, say that you've done a quilt, like some kind of a sampler, and you want to set it up this way, this is the layout that you use, blocks on point. Freeform Layout, if you look here, it just shows a big blank. It's because it enables you to set up the blocks however you want them. You can make them any size, shape, configuration that you want to. Hexagonal blocks, if you look, this is for your hexes. And there's another selection that you can click on right here that says alternate. And what that does is it flips it 90 degrees so that they go across this way instead of up and down. And so that's what that allows it to do. And then the last layout type right here at the bottom is called baby blocks. And if you click on this one, it will show up. And this is a really fun one to play with. The tumbling blocks or the cubes, whatever you want to call it, baby blocks. That one is really fun to play with. Now, if I come back up here out in the layout type and I show you, and I click on diagonal with a sash in the corner. This is going to be the quilt we're going to play with as we go across here. You can either do a single block, which means I will go and drop one block in here, and every single one of these blocks will have the same block in it. If I do alternate blocks, that means that this block and this block and this block and this block and this block are all going to be the same, but these ones right here that are on top of it and below it, the every other ones, are going to be different blocks. A sampler would allow me to go through and put a different block in every single one of these. And they're not going to repeat unless I choose to repeat them myself. And then a sequence of blocks. This one is kind of fun. So if you wanted to do 1, 2 blocks and have them repeat 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, you can do this, and you can choose your sequence length right here. If you click the up button or the down button, it's going to change the sequence on that. I'm actually going to come here and click on alternate blocks. I think that those are kind of fun to play with. And then right now it tells me what my quilt measurement is. Now I can come up here and I can either click on this tab that says size to go to the next one, or I can click next right here, and it will take me to what my next choice would be for this block layout. All right, right here, this is my block counts. So this gives me how many blocks across and how many blocks down. I can change these by either clicking on these two buttons here, the up or the down, or I can highlight it and I can type in what they are, and then I can tap between the two choices. So we're going to make that 6. You know what? I want to go back to, let's go down. Let's go back to the 5. I kind of like the 5. And then this is the size of my blocks. Now, as long as I have this one clicked, it's going to keep them in proportion so that they are 4 inches on each side. And I actually want to make these a little bigger. So let's go ahead and let's make these 6-inch blocks. And it's just going to do a little recalculating there. You can see that my quilt measurement has went up. Now, if I want to, instead of playing around with these specific things, I can come here and I can choose from this quilt sizing, I can choose a standard size. So if I know I want to make a queen size quilt, I can click right here on queen size quilt. And what it's going to do is it's going to take my, my blocks here and place them. So if I do that and then I click calculate size, right there, it lays it out for me. In a queen size quilt, a 90 by 100 with 6-inch blocks, I'm going to have 10 across and 11 down, and that's what my quilt's going to look like. So just to make us have a little less, I'm going to make these 12 inches, 12-inch blocks, and I'm going to go back here and click calculate size again, and you see that it changed it so that my quilt is pretty darn close. Well, it's 84 7/8 square. But it's doing it as close as it can to this standard size there for me. So those are kind of fun ones to play with depending on the size of block and the size of the quilt you want to be. This is where you decide, you make those decisions here on the size tab. Now, once again, I can either click on medallion or I can go to the next, but actually we're going to skip medallion right now. If I want to do a medallion quilt, you can refer to another tutorial that we have done about that, about how to set up a medallion quilt. But if you want to do a medallion quilt, I'll just click on this top here. This is where you do it. We're going to go next to the borders tab. We're going to add some borders. Right now, this quilt currently has no borders. I would like to add some though, so I'm going to come down to this button right here that says add border, and I'm going to click on it. And it is going to allow me to add a border. This tells me which number of border I'm on. I'm on the first one, and you see that it shows up in white here. I'll make that a little easier. I'm going to once again keep this clicked in proportion here on the border widths, and I'm going to make that 6 inches by 6 inches. Now that just popped up, and I've got a nice white border all the way around that. I can choose the type of border I want. Do I want it to have the cornerstones, the nice little blocks in the corner? Do I want my corners to be mitered? Have that little seam that goes across the corner right there. Do I want them to be horizontal straight, which means that the longest strip is going to be horizontal, or vertical straight, which means the longest strip will be vertical? Those are all choices I can make. And I can decide how many blocks I want to have per repeat, per strip here. I can have 1 per block. If I click that one, it just sets it automatically, or I can go do a specific count, and this one will leave it whole. So if I wanted to do this border with just say 1 fabric, I would leave on specific count 1. If I want to do 1 per block, what it's going to do is it's going to line these up with these blocks here. You see how it just dropped those in? And then on the vertical, I can do the same thing. I can do 1 per block, and then those will just go ahead and line up. I actually want all of these to be a specific count, just 1, because I'm going to make this a solid border around. And the border placement is single or a sampler. So once again, just like when I did the layout of the quilt, I can choose if I want to have if I want to be able to have multiple blocks in there, which I would do as a sampler. I can put a different block in every slot, or as a single, I just want it to be 1, which is like a straight one. I can do that there. Now, if I want to add a border, I can click add a border. It will automatically add a border on the outside, and it will repeat the size of the border that I just did. Now, if I decide, you know what, actually, I'm going to go back to border number 1, and I want to insert a border, I can click on that one, and then it will slide one in right there in between those two so that I can play with them. I can delete a border if I decide I don't want one. The one that's right here on the inside, I can delete that one. I decided I didn't want it, or I can click clear all borders. Right now, I like this quilt with 2 borders though, so I'm going to go ahead and click next, and we're going to move to the next tab. Here is my sashing. So I want to put sashing in between each of these blocks. So I'm going to click right here on inner sash. Inner sash means that it's going to go between the blocks. It's going to go in between the blocks. I want it to be a 1-inch sash. I want it to be kept in proportion, so I'm going to keep that one clicked. And my setting is going to be a single, not a sampler, meaning that if I choose to put a block in there, they are going to all be the same. This also is going to allow me, when I go in and put colors in it, if I have Effect All chosen on my Design tab, I will be able to have those all be the same color with one click. I can also choose an outer sash. If you guys look here, you'll see this, it's like shows up as a dark black line there and then kind of the white line right across there. So I can have that sash to just kind of be like a stop border. I can easily do that there. I'm going to move that out of the way. I can have all of that done just with a click. And once again, 1 inch by 1 inch. And you know what? I'm liking how this is looking. However, I'm noticing that my quilt is getting really big, 117 and 15/16 inches. Pretty exact. So that's how you do the sashing. I am going to go back to previous, and I'm actually going to delete a border. So I'm going to come to this button right here, click delete border, and I'm going to go into my next one, 105. So now I'm ending up with roughly a king size quilt. All right, now our next tab right here is binding. This is really awesome. It doesn't really show up so much when you're playing on the design wall, the binding, but it will calculate it in the yardage, which is priceless, so that we don't forget to buy enough fabric to be able to bind our quilt. So you've got a bunch of different choices here. So if you're finished width, you want it to be 1/4 inch. You can leave it set at that. I like to set mine to 1/2 inch, because then it does 1/4 inch on each side when I set my binding. And you've got different options here. No binding, a straight binding, and it tells you right here, I'm going to need 437 and 11/16 inches of binding, 1.5 inches wide. French binding is a double fold binding, and so that is going to need 411 inches of 2.5 inch wide. Or bias binding, meaning it's going to be cut on the grain. This once again tells you, and it tells you what size of a square to cut it from. It's pretty great. You are lots of information right here to be able to figure your binding. I like to do French binding that is folded in half. This is what I usually choose, so I'm going to leave it selected on that right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and click next, and the final tab in the Quilt Wizard right here is layers. Now, depending on if I want to do stencils on it, meaning I want to try out my quilting patterns on it, or if I want to do applique, this is where I make those choices. So if I do want to use any of these layers here, I need to click Layers Enabled, which makes them so that they're visible and I can play with them. I do not like to click this one, but it is an option, only active layer visible. If I'm working on something very specific and small, I will click on this one, but I usually like to have all of the layers visible at one time so that I can see how one layer will affect all of the different layers, the stencil, the applique, and the base. And then the horizontal layer tab, I like having this one clicked. It's going to put a tab right across underneath this. It's going to put right here underneath this status bar, it's going to put a layer, horizontal layer tabs, and I'm going to have these tabs available to click on. So I'm going to click on stencils and applique because I want to use both of those. Now my quilt is all set up. I'm going to click finish. Quilt-Pro is going to go ahead and put this quilt up here, and I am ready to go. If you get any of this kind of stuff right here where it's a little bit funky, you can come up here to Options, go down and click Refresh, and it will clean up your screen. It will clean up that little spot right there, and then you're ready to start designing your quilt. Thanks so much for watching. Please hit subscribe below so you don't miss out on any of our new tutorials. And if you have any questions or comments about how to set up a quilt in Quilt Wizard, please comment below. Thanks for watching and have fun quilting.